Thanks for tuning in. I'm returning to a topic which I've covered before on at least several occasions, to be honest with you, but it reoccurs so many times that I think it's worth repeating and critiquing it. Christians often phone in and they say, why would those who were put to death, why would they die for a lie? So we got a call here from Chris from a couple of years ago. Matt dealt very well with it. He called in with the same old argument. Why would the apostles be martyred for a lie? Matt dealt very effectively with it, and he said that even if the apostles could be proven to have been martyred in great suffering and torture, even if they'd left behind signed documents stating that they'd seen the resurrection or they'd seen Jesus alive after he was dead, and they were prepared to die for the truth of this belief and be martyred painfully, even then it would be not sufficient evidence for him to accept that the resurrection actually happened. So I thought he put it very, very well there. I've also made similar comments, but he really crystallized exactly why, no matter how much evidence you've got that they really truly believe this, and even if there were first-hand accounts of these eyewitness testimonies, signed documents, even then it wouldn't be enough. But that what we've got more or less are just stories and claims. And if signed documents are not enough, then obviously stories and claims certainly won't be. And that the conviction of somebody for a particular belief does not establish the truth of that belief. There have been people who've been martyred, died for false beliefs, and there's also the possibility that somebody could die for a known lie in order to promote a greater good. So there are all these reasons why it's not a good argument. So after laying out all these reasons why Matt feels that it's a poor reason for belief, the caller then came back and said, yes, but why would they die for a lie? He hadn't really listened at all. And Matt said, didn't you just hear what I said? I spoke for 2-3 minutes. He's not saying that they lied. That's not the point. Nobody's saying that anybody lied and that anybody died for a lie. And he had to rehash what he'd already said. So despite all that, the caller came back yet again, and he laid out an impressive list of martyrs. So I'm just going to play that clip now, and then I'm going to comment on it.
And I guess that's why I kind of, when I said in my question, I was talking about the historicity of Christianity. When I look at the apostles being martyred for these beliefs, and then their apostles being martyred for these beliefs, and the first 33 popes, for example, of the Catholic Church, all being martyred.
Yeah, so there we are. So despite already having his rationale completely overturned, he still comes back to this so-called impressive list of martyrs. And I think this is where you've got to start attacking the historicity, the so-called historicity. If somebody won't accept the quite reasonable argument or defeater to the proposition that why would they die for a lie? Why would martyrs be prepared to die for something that they know is false? If Christians won't accept the defeaters that you put forward for that, and there are many of them, then you've got to start attacking the historicity, the so-called historicity of the claims, and say, okay, well, if you won't accept that reasonable critique of your belief, let's then look at the historicity. So what have we got? We've got the apostles. How do we know how they died? In the New Testament, we've got reported the death of Judas. Okay, well, obviously Judas, we know, or at least we've seen the story of how he died, so he doesn't really count. What else have we got? The only two that we've got which have got any sort of historicity about them is the death of Paul, the Apostle Paul, St. Paul, the man who really started Christianity off. We kind of know that he was put to the sword in Rome. We don't know the exact circumstances. And the other one, I think, is Peter, who it's reputed, although not confirmed, was crucified upside down. And there's some evidence there that he was part of a general wave of Christians who were being put to death in, I think it was 64 AD, after the Great Fire of Rome. The emperor was blaming all the Christians and crucifying them by the thousands. So it's not like these Christians were put in a position and said, right, recant or die. There's no evidence that anything like that happened. If you were fingered as a Christian, if you were identified as a Christian, you were given a summary trial on very little evidence. You wouldn't really have had much say in the proceedings. You would have just been led out and crucified. There would have been no opportunity to say, "Oh, I'm not a Christian. I'm not." You know, I mean, that kind of thing wouldn't have happened. You would have been identified by the authorities or by somebody pointing the finger at you. Yes, he's a Christian. I saw him with such and such a group. And you know, I mean, in those days, they didn't have a rigorous sort of justice system. That would have been it. You would have been dead. So we've got those two, which to me are not impressive at all. And then we've got what they call tradition. I've covered this. I've done the research. That in the later of the first part of the 1st century and the 2nd century Common Era, we had a lot of documents appearing written by what they call the early church fathers, who wrote down various stories about how the apostles supposedly died. There's no confirmation of this, and these stories are written down like 100 years after they supposedly would have died, and are considered very unreliable historically. They're not considered historical at all. So there's no historicity to them. A lot of these accounts contradict each other, place, time, method of death, and they're just not reliable at all. But they've been promoted throughout the ages, and Christians have clung to these beliefs that yes, you know, the martyrs, that they died for their beliefs. The beliefs must be true, otherwise they wouldn't have died. And there's very little historical evidence to back up how they actually died. As for the popes, these 33 popes, well, I mean, these early church leaders, they call them the popes. Again, there's very little historical evidence as to how they died. But not only that, we're talking about these early popes. They were around at least 100 years after Jesus died and could not possibly have witnessed the resurrection. So they definitely were not eyewitnesses, and you couldn't claim that they wouldn't have died for a lie because they were there and they saw it. You couldn't make that claim. They may have well believed that Jesus was truly resurrected, just as a matter of faith. And again, they may have been killed as Christians, just being identified as Christians, or there were a lot of factions in those days, and you know, there were a lot of Christian groups even killing each other. So there's no evidence that any of those early popes, who supposedly some of them were martyred, as such died for any of their beliefs. There's no there are no historical records under exactly which circumstances they died. As for the apostles of the apostles that he mentions, again, those apostles of the apostles were not or could not have been eyewitnesses, and there are no eyewitnesses first-hand accounts in the Bible at all. So what we've got here is a body of what I call pseudo-evidence. It's not really evidence at all. And I know there are complex reasons why Christians believe, but I think that, as we heard in this call, or at least I heard in this call, so I'm not playing you the whole call, no matter how many times Matt deconstructed this whole thing, he kept coming back. Yeah, but you know, why would they die for a lie? It's like he's got some kind of weird aversion to reason and rational argument. He just keeps clinging to this attractive belief that there were Christians who were dying for their beliefs. I mean, look, in Tudor times, there were in England Christians who were dying on a point of doctrine. There were Anabaptists and there were Protestants, there were Catholics who were dying on a point of doctrine, and they obviously could not possibly have seen the resurrection. And they were prepared to just die on a point of doctrine. So there's no doubt that people would be prepared to die on a point of belief or faith, even if they hadn't witnessed something firsthand. I think this is one of the weakest, possibly the weakest set of evidence I've ever seen to back up claims for the resurrection. It's very, very poor. Okay, well that's about it. I guess most of you will agree with me, because virtually all of you are atheists. Or if you're a Christian and you think that there's something I've missed, let me know. Okay, be back again soon with another video. Bye for now.